Hey everyone, welcome back to another explainer. We've got a really incredible concept to explore today, so let's just jump right in. Picture this, a cinematic, biopunk vision of Medina at night. The air is practically buzzing with anticipation, and you've got these neon green and gold lights reflecting off architecture that is ancient but totally technologically advanced. In this world, we're following two guides, Salem, who is basically a master coder of the human soul, and his companion Jasas, who, yes, happens to be a cybernetically enhanced camel rocking neon shades. And together they're looking at the absolute foundational code of the human operating system. What they reveal is actually pretty mind-blowing. See, while the mandatory month-long installation of Ramadan is absolutely crucial for everybody, true mastery of the self, like the ultimate optimization of your personal system, that requires voluntary, specialized upgrades throughout the entire year. So today we're mapping out exactly what those protocols look like.
Okay, so what does this actually mean in practice? Well, Salem points out that the Islamic concept of Sawm, which we translate as fasting, is honestly super misunderstood a lot of the time. People think it's just about starving yourself or passive deprivation, but it's not that at all. Instead, I want you to think of it as this highly algorithmic rebalancing of the human code. It's a precise routine orchestrated by Allah designed to clear out the daily bloatware we all accumulate. Its main function is this brilliant twofold bio-spiritual sync. On one side, it's engineered to expand the Ra, which is your spiritual operating system. And at the exact same time, it shrinks and restricts the nafs, which represents our base, glitchy ego and all those endless worldly appetites. It's really a tale of two systems. Imagine glowing, pristine data streams flowing flawlessly. That's the luminous Ru. It's clean, it's optimized, and it operates at peak efficiency when it isn't bogged down by constant physical consumption. But then you have the glitchy nafs. That's the base eco. It's demanding, it's constantly begging for input, for food, for distractions, and it basically causes your whole spiritual system to lag. So, voluntary fasts act as these critical software patches. When you run a fasting protocol outside of that mandatory Ramadan window, you're actively overriding the darker, glitchy code of the nafs. And by doing that, you're giving the luminous code of the Ru the bandwidth it needs to fully expand.
Now, as we navigate through these silver cyber palm trees in our biopunk oasis, Salem introduces the very first massive, high-yield annual sync. He brings up an ancient but perfectly preserved prophetic tradition narrated by Thauban. It says, "Whoever fasts Ramadan a month and 10 months and fasts 6 days after breaking the fast, that is fasting a year." This right here introduces the highly recommended protocol of fasting 6 days in the month of Shawwal, which is the lunar month right after Ramadan. But you might be wondering, why does this specific, random-sounding combination equal an entire year of system optimization?
Well, let's run the numbers real quick, because it comes down to this brilliant multiplier effect. In the Islamic spiritual algorithm, every single good deed is multiplied by a factor of at least 10. So do the math. You fast the 30 days of Ramadan, multiply that by 10, and boom, you've got 300 days of spiritual credit. Then you apply the Shawwal patch. You fast just 6 more days, which are also multiplied by 10, giving you 60 days. 300 plus 60 equals 360 days. That is a complete lunar year. Literally, just by combining the mandatory Ramadan install with this super quick 6-day voluntary patch, you complete your full annual system cycle. It leaves 0 gaps in your spiritual firewall. And this mathematical precision, it actually builds into an even larger cosmic structure. It's like a giant puzzle. Our guides explain that there are other high-yield annual fasts baked directly into the cosmic architecture of sacred time itself. These specific days are designed to clear massive amounts of spiritual glitches all at once. According to the source material, these are the absolute highest tier of recommended fasts. They operate on specific days of the calendar where your network connectivity to the divine is just unparalleled. Talk about incredible ROI, return on investment. We are looking at 2 major annual updates here. First up is the day of Arafah, which lands on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. If you aren't physically performing the Hajj pilgrimage, running the fasting protocol on this single day clears spiritual glitches, sins basically, for 2 entire years. It clears the past year and the coming year. Think about that. And right next to it, we have the day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. Running the protocol on this day clears the glitches of the past year. These are incredibly powerful, highly efficient patches that completely reset the human system with barely any downtime. But you know how it is. You can't just run a massive system update once or twice a year and expect your hardware to run flawlessly the rest of the time, right? Justice jumps in here to remind us about the necessity of frequent maintenance patches. Between those huge annual updates like Arafah and Ashura, human code naturally gets fragmented. It's just daily life. So, to keep that connection perfectly stable and keep the ego in check, the sound protocols give us highly specific weekly and monthly syncs.
Sawm breaks down the first of these regular routines. The white days, or Ayam al-Bid. These hit on the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of every single lunar month. It's when the moon is at its absolute fullest and brightest in the night sky. The Prophet highly recommended this sequential 3-day patch. And if we bring back that multiplier math we used for Shawwal, fasting 3 days a month multiplied by 10 equals 30 days of reward. So effectively, if you just run this little protocol every month, your spiritual code stays optimized as if you were fasting all year round. You are perpetually synced with the lunar cycle.
Zooming in even closer to our day-to-day timeline, we find the weekly maintenance protocols, Mondays and Thursdays. Now, why these days specifically? Well, historically, these days are deeply linked to monumental system launches for humanity. When the Prophet was asked why he fasted on Mondays, he explained that Monday wasn't just the day he was born into the world, it was also the exact day the initial download of the Quranic revelation began. So fasting on these days is a way to consistently align your personal system with the rhythm of the universe's most important data transfers.
When you pull all of this jurisprudence together, you end up with this beautifully complete matrix. The hierarchy of all these protocols is crystal clear. Right at the top, you've got wajib, your obligatory protocols, like making up a missed Ramadan day or fulfilling a vow. Then, you drop down into the highly recommended high-yield patches we just talked about, which is the mustahab category. But down at the bottom of the matrix, the code gets really strict. We have makruh, which is essentially disliked, unoptimized code, and muharram, which are absolute system overrides where running a fasting protocol is strictly forbidden.
And that brings us to a really vital concept. Even in our futuristic sci-fi Medina, the hardware, meaning the physical human body, has hard limits. Salem warns us that you absolutely cannot overclock the system. You can't just execute a Sawm protocol every single day without eventually damaging the hardware. There are specific days hard-coded into the Islamic calendar where your system actually requires celebration, it requires nourishment, and it requires community connection. Trying to fast on those days, it isn't an upgrade, it's literally a violation of the terms of service.
This triggers a massive red warning alert in the Biopunk UI. We've hit a strict error, do not execute scenario. The primary forbidden days are the 2 major festivals, Eid al-Fitr, which is the 1st of Shawwal right after Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha, the 1st of Dhul Hijjah. Fasting on these 2 days is completely forbidden. Scholars call this Muharram, and that is by absolute consensus across all schools of thought. On these days, the system demands that you break your fast, enjoy the bounty of Allah, and share that nourishment with your community.
And Jasa points out another critical entry on that locked-out list, the days of Tashriq. These are the 11th, 12th, and 13th of Dhul Hijjah, which come immediately following Eid al-Adha. The prophetic tradition explicitly flags these as designated days for eating, drinking, and the remembrance of Allah. They are built for community and spiritual joy, so fasting is locked out. Now, to be totally precise, our source does note a very specific minor developer exception here. Imam Malik allowed a concession on the 3rd day specifically for people who had made vows, but broadly speaking, these days are hard-coded for celebration.
So we really need to clarify the difference between a total system crash and just running glitchy, unoptimized code. Fasting on the Eids, that is a system crash. It's Muharram, a total failure of the protocol. But what about makruh, the disliked fasts? This is what happens if you try to fast every single day of your life without a break, a practice known as wasal. Or if you isolate just Friday for fasting without pairing it with Thursday or Saturday, or if you isolate the month of Rajab. The system will technically let the code run, but it's highly discouraged. Why? Because it unnecessarily strains the human hardware and breaks away from the perfectly balanced Sunnah protocol.
Which brings us to the end of our journey through this digital oasis. Salem and Jassas look out over the neon reflections on the water. The data streams of the Ruh flowing so much brighter and clearer than before. The entire roadmap is laid out for us. You've got your massive annual patches like Arafah and Ashra, your 10x multiplier in Shawwal, and your weekly and monthly maintenance syncs. The protocols are set. So the only question left for you to ponder is this. How are you going to actively utilize these voluntary Sawm patches to master your nafs and elevate your own spiritual code?